There comes a moment in every connection when the one who spoke too much finally becomes quiet. Not the temporary silence born of anger or manipulation, not the cold withdrawal meant to punish or control, but the profound, settled silence of someone who has finally stopped trying to be heard by ears that refuse to listen. And it is precisely in that moment, when your words cease and your silence begins, that everything shifts. You have spent weeks, perhaps months, trying to communicate what you felt, what you needed, what the connection meant to you. You explained, you opened your heart, you made yourself vulnerable in ways that cost you sleep and peace. And what you received in return was indifference wrapped in politeness, distance disguised as needing space, or worse, the casual dismissal of someone who took your words as guaranteed, who believed your voice would always be there, speaking into the void of their half-presence. But then something changed. Not in him, not yet. The change occurred in you. You stopped. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally understood that your words were being spent on someone not yet ready to receive them, that your emotional labor was fueling a dynamic where only one person was truly present. Your silence did not arrive as a strategy or a game. It arrived as self-preservation, as dignity, as the natural boundary that forms when exhaustion meets clarity. And now, in this new quiet, something unexpected is happening. He is beginning to think, really think, not the surface thoughts that come easily when someone is available and offering themselves freely, but the deep, uncomfortable thoughts that only emerge when what was taken for granted is suddenly, undeniably absent. I know what it took for you to reach this silence. I know the nights you lay awake composing messages you would never send, the conversations you rehearsed in your mind where finally somehow the perfect combination of words would make him understand. You told yourself that if you could just explain it correctly, if you could find the right way to express what you felt, he would finally see you, hear you, choose you with the clarity and consistency you deserved. But every attempt at communication seemed to fall into the same void. Your vulnerability was met with vague reassurances that changed nothing. Your honesty about what you needed was acknowledged, but not honored. Your expressions of how his inconsistency affected you were received with temporary apologies that preceded the exact same patterns repeating. You began to feel crazy, like you were overreacting, asking for too much, being too intense. The self-doubt crept in because when someone continuously fails to meet you with reciprocal effort, it becomes easier to question yourself than to accept that they are simply not showing up. The exhaustion that led to your silence was not just emotional fatigue. It was soul-deep depletion. You had given and given and given from a well that received nothing in return, and eventually the well ran dry. Not because you stopped loving or caring, but because even the deepest love cannot sustain itself when it is perpetually flowing in one direction. So you stopped. You stopped explaining. You stopped initiating. You stopped making yourself available for the crumbs of attention he offered when it was convenient for him. And this stopping was not a performance. It was not designed to get a reaction. It was the organic response of a system that finally chose its own survival over the exhausting work of trying to sustain a connection that one person was carrying alone. If you have reached this place of silence after months or years of trying to be heard, write in the comments, "I honor my silence." This acknowledgement is not giving up. It is finally showing up for yourself. To understand what is happening in his mind, now that your words have been replaced by silence, we must explore a principle that Carl Jung understood deeply, the psychological reality of absence as presence. Jung taught that the psyche does not operate according to logic or fairness. It operates according to need, according to what activates the unconscious, according to what forces confrontation with shadow material that we would prefer to avoid. When you were speaking, when your words were freely available, when your emotional availability was constant, his psyche could remain comfortable in its unconscious assumptions. There was no urgency to truly listen because he believed at a level deeper than conscious thought that you would always be there. Your voice had become like ambient sound, persistent enough that it no longer demanded his full attention. The human mind, in its efficiency, learns to filter out what is constant, to relegate it to background noise, while focusing on what is novel, what is uncertain, what carries the charge of potential loss. But silence is not background noise. Silence is a void, and the human psyche cannot tolerate a void without attempting to fill it. When your voice stopped providing the constant reassurance of your availability, of your continued investment, of your willingness to remain engaged despite his lack of reciprocation, that absence created a space, a hollow echo where your words used to live. And into that space rushed something he had successfully avoided while you were speaking: awareness. Jung spoke of the shadow as containing not only the darkness we reject, but also the undeveloped potential we have not yet claimed. For this man, part of his shadow was his dependency on your emotional labor, his taking for granted of your consistency, his failure to recognize the treasure of someone who loved him enough to keep trying even when trying was met with so little. These truths about himself could remain unconscious as long as the dynamic continued unchanged. Your continued speaking, your continued presence, your continued effort allowed him to avoid confronting what he was not offering, what he was taking without reciprocating, what he would lose if he continued in his half presence. But your silence removed that protection. Suddenly, the mirror that your words provided, the reflection of himself as someone worthy of effort, someone whose presence mattered enough for you to keep showing up, has been replaced by a different mirror, the reflection of absence. And absence has a voice of its own, doesn't it? It speaks in the questions that surface in the quiet. Why isn't she reaching out? What changed? Did I take her for granted? Have I lost her? These questions are not comfortable. They activate the very shadow material he avoided while you were available. They force him to look at his own behavior not through the comfortable filter of your continued presence, but through the stark reality of what happens when that presence withdraws. This is the beginning of his reckoning. Now let's explore the precise psychological mechanism that explains why silence, where words used to be, has such profound power to shift someone's consciousness. This is not manipulation or playing games. This is simply how the human psyche responds to the loss of what it did not know it depended on. When you were speaking, you were doing several forms of invisible emotional labor that he likely never consciously registered. You were initiating contact, which meant he never had to risk rejection by reaching out first. You were expressing your feelings, which meant he never had to venture into the vulnerable territory of naming his own. You were asking for what you needed, which paradoxically made it easier for him not to give it, because your asking created a dynamic where meeting your needs felt like compliance rather than genuine generosity of spirit. You were, in essence, doing the emotional work for two people, and that allowed him to remain emotionally passive while still receiving the benefits of connection. Jung understood that psychological growth requires discomfort. He wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. As long as the dynamic was comfortable for him, as long as he could receive your attention, your affection, your effort without having to match it with his own, there was no catalyst for growth, no motivation to examine his own patterns, no pressure to show up differently." But comfort is the enemy of consciousness. We do not question what is working for us, even when it is not truly serving our highest development. Your silence removed his comfort. Suddenly he must confront the reality of what connection actually requires: reciprocity, presence, emotional risk, the vulnerability of reaching out without knowing how it will be received. Without your words to fill the space, without your initiation to carry the momentum, without your emotional availability to cushion his half participation, he is forced to face a choice he previously avoided: either step into full presence or accept that his passivity has consequences. This is where the mechanism becomes particularly powerful. The human brain is wired to pay attention to change, to patterns breaking, to the unexpected. Your consistency, while beautiful and valuable, had paradoxically become predictable, and predictability, to the unconscious mind, translates to security. Security does not demand attention or action, but when a pattern breaks, when the constant becomes suddenly absent, the brain shifts into alert mode. Threat detection activates. Questions arise. Where there was autopilot, there is now awareness. He begins to notice your silence in ways he never noticed your speaking. Every day that passes without your message becomes a presence in itself, a void that he cannot help but feel. He checks his phone with a frequency that surprises him. He finds himself wondering what you are doing, whether you are thinking of him, whether you have moved on. These thoughts are not conscious choices, they are the automatic response of a psyche that has registered loss and is attempting to assess the damage. But here is where it gets even more interesting. The silence not only makes him notice your absence, it begins to reshape his memory of your presence. Psychologists call this the scarcity effect, the human tendency to assign greater value to what is no longer readily available. Suddenly, the conversations he half listened to begin to replay in his mind with a different weight. The vulnerability you offered that he received with casual acknowledgement now appears as the rare gift it actually was. The consistency you provided that he took as guaranteed now reveals itself as the choice it always was. A choice you made daily to show up, a choice you have now stopped making. In the absence of new interactions with you, his mind returns to old ones, but with a changed lens. He is no longer filtering those memories through the comfortable assumption that you will always be there. He is reviewing them through the uncomfortable awareness that he may have lost you, and this awareness transforms how he sees what he had. Now let me show you the specific signs that reveal this internal shift is occurring. That your silence is no longer just an absence he can comfortably ignore, but a presence that has begun to consume his thoughts in ways your words never could. Sign 1, he initiates contact after extended silence. After weeks or even months of you being the primary initiator, he suddenly reaches out. The message may seem casual, a meme that reminded him of you, a question about something innocuous, a simple "Hey, how have you been?" But the timing reveals its true nature. This is not random. This is him testing whether the bridge still exists, whether your silence is permanent or temporary, whether there is still a way back to your presence. Pay attention not to the words of his message, but to the fact that he broke his own pattern of passive reception to actively seek contact. Sign 2. increased monitoring of your life from a distance through social media, through mutual connections, through whatever channels are available to him. He is paying attention to your life in ways he did not when you were readily available. He watches your stories consistently. He asks friends about you with carefully casual questions. He notices changes in your energy, your content, your apparent emotional state. This surveillance is not healthy, but it is revealing. It shows that you have not left his consciousness. In fact, you occupy more of his mental space now in your absence than you did in your constant presence. Sign 3. He displays sudden self-reflection or regret. This might come through in things he says to mutual friends, or in messages where he acknowledges, even indirectly, that he did not appreciate what he had. I should have listened more, or I took some things for granted, or I'm realizing some patterns I need to work on. These statements, if they emerge, are evidence that your silence has done what your words could not. It has forced him to look at himself rather than at you. This is the beginning of accountability, even if it is not yet fully formed. Sign 4. Changes in his own life patterns. Notice if he makes visible changes that seem designed either to get your attention or to address the deficiencies that characterize his behavior with you. Perhaps he becomes more communicative with others. Perhaps he ends other situations that were similarly ambiguous. Perhaps he demonstrates through visible action that he is working on the very things you once told him needed to change. These changes may or may not be sustainable, but their appearance signals that your absence has created enough discomfort to motivate movement. Sign 5. Your own inner shift from pain to peace. This is perhaps the most important sign, though it is about you rather than him. If you notice that your silence has stopped feeling like deprivation and started feeling like dignity, if you have moved from hoping he will reach out to being genuinely content, whether he does or not, this shift in your energy is palpable, even across distance. And paradoxically, it is often this shift, when you no longer need him to validate your worth, that makes you most magnetic to his newly awakened consciousness. If you recognize 2 or more of these signs, write in the comments, "My silence speaks louder." This is not arrogance. It is the acknowledgement that you have finally stopped negotiating your value. Now we must address the critical error that many people make when they begin to see these signs, when they sense that their silence is finally being felt, that the absence of their words is creating the impact their words never could. This mistake can undo all the powerful work that your silence has accomplished and return you to the exact dynamic you finally escaped. The mistake is this: interpreting his awakening awareness as permission to resume your role as the emotional pursuer, to flood the space with words again, to return to the pattern over functioning in the connection, because now, finally, he seems to be noticing. I understand the temptation. After months of feeling invisible, of speaking into a void, of wondering if anything you said mattered, the first sign that he is actually thinking about you, missing you, regretting his passivity, this feels like validation. It feels like proof that you are not crazy, not too much, not unimportant. Every cell in your body wants to respond to that first message, to re-engage, to show him that yes, you are still here, still available, still willing to try, if he is finally ready to show up. But here is the truth you must integrate. His awareness of what he lost is only the beginning of transformation, not its completion. Awareness does not automatically translate to changed behavior. Regret does not guarantee that he has developed the emotional capacity to meet you differently. Missing you does not mean he is prepared to do the work required to be a true partner rather than a passive recipient of your labor. If you rush back into speaking before he has demonstrated sustained, concrete change in behavior, Not just words, not just temporary effort born of fear of loss, but genuine shifts in how he shows up over time. You teach his unconscious mind a dangerous lesson that his passivity has no real consequences, that your silence was temporary and your words will always return, that he can continue in his half presence because ultimately you will still be there. Additionally, and this is crucial, returning to words too soon robs you of the powerful position you have finally claimed. Your silence has given you something words never could. It has made your presence valuable because it is no longer guaranteed. It has created mystery where there was once transparency. It has established that access to you must be earned through actual presence, not purchased cheaply through occasional attention and vague promises. The transformation that is possible here, both in him and in the dynamic between you, requires that you hold the boundary your silence has created. Not forever, not as punishment, but for as long as it takes to see whether his awakening translates into genuine change or whether it is simply a temporary discomfort he wants to alleviate by returning to the comfortable pattern of your overfunctioning. So, what is the wise path forward now that you have claimed the power of your silence? How do you honor the boundary you have created while remaining open to authentic transformation if it genuinely occurs? The answer lies in what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating all aspects of yourself, including the part that gave too much, spoke too much, tried too much. Your work now is not to manage his awakening or to guide his journey back to you. Your work is to deepen into the sovereignty that your silence represents. Maintain the boundary of your silence. This does not mean never speaking to him again. It means that when and if you do speak, your words come from overflow, not from lack. Your communication, if it occurs, is a gift offered from fullness, not an attempt to fix what is broken or to reassure him that you are still available despite his previous failure to show up. Before you speak, ask yourself, am I speaking because I have genuinely healed and have something to offer from my wholeness? Or am I speaking because I hope my words will finally make him change? Only the former is worth breaking your silence for. Observe actions, not words if he reaches out, if he expresses regret or awareness, if he promises to do better. Receive these words with compassionate skepticism. Words are easy. They cost nothing. What you are looking for is sustained behavioral change over time, weeks and months of him demonstrating through action that he has integrated the lesson your silence taught. Does he initiate consistently? Does he make plans and follow through? Does he show up with emotional presence, not just physical proximity? Does he do his own inner work rather than expecting you to heal him with your return? These are the questions that matter. Continue your own evolution. Your silence created space, not just space in the connection, but space in your own life and consciousness. What have you done with that space? Have you filled it with your own growth, your own joy, your own projects and relationships and self-discovery? Or have you left it empty, a placeholder for his eventual return? The former makes you genuinely magnetic. The latter makes you still dependent. Use this time to become so deeply rooted in your own value, so clear about what you will and will not accept, so fulfilled by your own presence, that his return becomes optional rather than necessary. Establish clear internal standards. Before any re-engagement can be healthy, you must know with absolute clarity what kind of relationship you are actually available for, not the potential relationship you hope could exist if only he would change. The actual relationship you deserve and will settle for nothing less than. Write it down if you need to. a relationship where both people initiate, where vulnerability is met with vulnerability, where presence is consistent, not sporadic, where your words are heard the first time, not the 50th, where you are chosen clearly and repeatedly, not kept in ambiguous limbo. These standards are not demands you place on him. They are boundaries you hold for yourself. Trust the process of natural consequences. Jung understood that the psyche has its own wisdom and timeline. You do not need to teach him the lesson of your absence. That lesson teaches itself through the natural consequence of losing what he failed to value. Your job is not to ensure he learns, but to ensure that you do not unlearn what your silence has taught you, that your voice is precious, that your words have power, that your presence is a gift not to be taken lightly. If he genuinely grows from this experience, that growth will become visible in ways that do not require your management or encouragement. If he does not grow, that too will become visible, and your silence will have protected you from wasting more years on someone not ready for what you offer. When you truly embody this, when your silence becomes not a tactic but an expression of your reclaimed dignity, several outcomes become possible, and all of them serve your highest good. Outcome 1, he rises to meet you. In some cases, your silence becomes the catalyst for genuine transformation. The discomfort it creates in him forces a confrontation with his own patterns that your words never could. He begins to do real inner work, not to get you back, but because he recognizes that his half-presence is a pattern that extends beyond you, a way of relating that has kept him from genuine intimacy in all areas of his life. He shows up differently, not with words, but with sustained action. He becomes someone who can receive the gift of your voice with the reverence it deserves. And if this occurs, if he demonstrates through months of consistent presence that he has integrated the lesson, then you can choose from power, not from desperation, whether you want to offer words again, whether you want to rebuild with someone who has proven himself capable of meeting you. Outcome 2, he does not change, but you are already free more commonly. He may have moments of awareness, periods of reaching out, temporary efforts to regain access to your presence, but the fundamental patterns remain. The awakening your silence triggered was not deep enough or sustained enough to create lasting change. He wants the comfort of your presence without the discomfort of genuine growth. And because you maintained your silence, because you did not rush back in at the first sign of his interest, you are able to see this clearly. You are not devastated because you were not invested in an outcome you cannot control. You already did the work of releasing him. His failure to rise to the occasion is simply confirmation of what your silence already knew. He was not ready, and you are no longer available for half measures. Outcome 3. Someone new appears, drawn to your new frequency often. When we stop giving our energy to what is not reciprocating, we create space for what can and will reciprocate to enter. Your silence has shifted your frequency from desperate to dignified, from available to everyone to selectively available, from word-seeking validation to presence that requires no explanation. This new frequency attracts different people, those who recognize value when they see it, who do not need your silence to teach them to appreciate your voice, who meet you with presence from the beginning because that is who they are, not who they had to be shocked into becoming. In all 3 outcomes, you win, because the real transformation was never about him. It was about you reclaiming the power you gave away every time you spoke into a void, every time you tried to convince someone of your worth, every time you stayed in a connection that required you to dim your light to make someone else comfortable. As we close, I want you to feel the full weight of what your silence represents. It is not coldness, it is not cruelty, it is not giving up on love. It is the most profound form of self-love you have ever practiced. The decision to stop abandoning yourself in pursuit of someone who was not yet capable of meeting you where you stood. He is realizing what he lost. That realization may come quickly or slowly, may lead to transformation or fade back into comfortable patterns. But his journey is no longer your concern. Your concern is maintaining the dignity you reclaimed when you finally stopped speaking to someone who was not truly listening. If you are ready to honor your silence as sacred, not as a temporary strategy, but as a permanent shift in how you offer yourself to the world, write in the comments, "My silence is my sovereignty." This is not about him anymore. This is about you refusing to ever again give your voice to those who do not treasure it. Subscribe to this channel if you are committed to understanding the deep psychology of connection, to learning when to speak and when silence is the most powerful statement you can make, to building relationships where your words are received as the gifts they are. In the next video, I will reveal what to do when someone returns after your silence, how to discern genuine change from temporary panic, and how to rebuild without betraying the lesson your silence taught you. Until then, remember, your words were always valuable. Your silence simply made that value impossible to ignore. Both are yours to offer or withhold. Choose wisely who deserves either.